Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm coming at you with an overly specific book recommendation, specifically for books that look at memory, personal identity and the continuation of the self, and then the mind-body distinction. So this is a whole subsection of a bunch of different philosophical concepts and ideas and debates that have been going on for literally hundreds of years. And I just have a collection of books that are all, they're fiction, but they're dealing with similar kind of concepts. And so if you are the kind of person who likes speculative fiction and likes the idea of playing around with what the conception of a person should be, I think you'll find these books really interesting. So I'm going to try and talk about them. I've got 5 in total, and then I'm going to try and link them back to the philosophical ideas that they reminded me of and that I feel like they are discussing. So the continuation of the self is basically the argument of what makes you the same person that you are today as you were when you were a child and that you'll be when you're 80 years old. And for a lot of philosophical arguments we kind of rely on the idea of a transitive property. So this is if A has this connection with B and B has this connection with C, then then C has this connection back with A, even though the two haven't technically met. So long as the 3-year-old that you were, the 5-year-old can remember what it's like to be the 3-year-old, and the 10-year-old can remember what it's like to be the 5-year-old, and then the 15-year-old, and you see how we can kind of track. You can go all the way back through and still be the same person. So we're kind of relying on like memory being this transitive property. And I have 2 books that talk about the idea of memory and personhood with it. The first one I have for this is the Book of M. I'll pop it up here. Can't remember author, so sorry about this. This is a speculative fiction where we're set in a world where people start to lose their shadows. And then once they start to lose their shadows, they start to lose their memories. And then it's the idea of basically it's kind of like got magic in it, and when the person forgets something, the way that they actually remember it then becomes how it is in reality. And that has all sorts of fun implications for like scepticism and our interactions with the world and qualia, and I won't even get into that right now, but that's a fun philosophical concept. Feel free to go Google that and check that out. But this book really explores the idea of what it is to be a person and how you connect those things back and what is important to hold on to. And then I don't want to say too much about the end because I don't want to spoil it for you, but it has some really cool stuff that it does at the end about people regaining their memories and how they do that and what that then means for that person and how important the outer shell is to the person that you are inside. It's a fantastic book. I absolutely adored it. Thought it was really cool. Plays around with books as well and how important books are to our identity in it, so definitely check that one out. Another one that I don't personally think did it quite as well, but is still quite a good book in its own right, is The Binding by Bridget Collins. So in this one, books actually, you can go to a binder and have your memories removed and made into a book, and then you won't have them anymore. And then if something happens to that book or it gets damaged, then those memories will come flooding back. The story goes off and becomes basically a bit more to do with a male-male romance and has elements of basically dealing with homosexuality and discrimination in it, but which is one of the reasons why I don't think it deals with that idea as well, because it's doing a different thing with that particular plot device. But I really did enjoy some of the discussion it did manage to fit in there about what that means for the person and like how many times can you repeat this process, what do you lose when you're taking these memories, and how important are they to who you are as a person, and how much do you basically notice them when they're missing. Really fun and interesting. Another topic that kind of all of these are sort of a bit mishmashy and like they all deal with very similar things and it's all kind of a bit of a mess, and that's philosophy for you. It's very difficult to really pass out these different ideas. But as well as the continuation of the self, one of the big discussions in philosophy is about what do we need, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for personhood, to be considered a person rather than just like a human or an animal or all these different things. Like, what does it mean for personhood? And one that I think does this really, really interestingly is M by, I think it's Bethany C. Clark, somebody like that. Again, I'll put it here. In this world, this is a novella where you can get your memories removed, similar to like The Binding, but this time when they're removed, they actually become like a physical representation of you at that moment in time, and they are a snapshot of that particular experience that they keep them reliving. But the story of Mem actually follows a memory who becomes more than this. She becomes sentient and conscious and is able to form memories in her own right and have her own experiences independent to her original creator. And this is where the really interesting discussion about what does it count Like, what do you need for her to count as a person in her own right, independent to her origins? And later down the line, because this individual who has these memories removed gets so many memories removed over the time, at what point does this person no longer really count as a person anymore, and the memory removed has got more consciousness and experience and ability to interact with the world than the originator? So which one is actually really the person? Which one is, I can't remember the character's name, I'm sorry, but which one deserves to be her? This naturally has, it's a very interesting discussion, and naturally has a lot of real world implications and ramifications when you do get things like Alzheimer's and dealing with people who are suffering from extreme memory loss and kind of brain degradation, or worse, extreme memory loss in that way. I don't want to make any comment right now about my feelings on any of that. It's just that these are books that are discussing this in a speculative fiction context, which is interesting to be able to do independent to the ethical ramifications in the real world, but that's how it kind of connects back through. I'm sorry, this is probably quite a messy video. It's been like, I've spent ages planning and prepping it, and I still don't feel like I have everything set, so I'm sorry if it's a bit blurry. Another one that deals with these ideas of, like, I referenced in the Book of M, the idea of how important is the outer casing to the individual inside, and this links back to the mind-body problem. So the mind-body problem is basically, how is there something that is you independent to your physical body? And we play around with different thought experiments like this about, like, could you swap two brains in people's heads, and then would they still be the same person if they're in, like, the different outer shell? How important is our physical, like, basically housing for our brain? Are we a thing independent to our body, or is there nothing else? And again, these are all just kind of discussions, and there's whole separate topics that branch out, and I'm not answering any of these for now, for God's sake. I mean, I did an undergraduate degree and didn't manage to answer a single damn thing, so people make it their life's careers to try and answer these things. I'm not doing that right now. But a book that I think explores this quite interestingly is The Possessions by Sarah Flannery Murphy. This one is, we live in a world, again, it's all speculative fiction, they all are, where we live in a world where you can go to a particular service provider where you give an item of somebody who's died recently, and then they are able to basically invoke that person's spirit and be a vessel for them, so you can kind of continue a relationship with them. The storyline of this is the main character, Edie, she is working with someone who is a widow, and she invokes this man's dead wife, and then basically ends up kind of keeping her a bit and continuing to keep her, and it's about the two of them living side by side. And it's this idea of having another person in your head, having bits where you are not there and they take over your body, and having the two memories and her personalities kind of blurring through, and not really knowing where the distinction is between the two of them. It's almost like a thriller in its own right, this book. It's really, really fascinating, but that's the kind of thing that it's playing around with here, is, you know, do you get second chances almost with this, and at what point do you become the other person? I don't know. And then with all of this, with modern day and society, when we're discussing, like, what does it mean to be a person and what does it mean to have your own identity, it naturally does lend itself towards discussions about artificial intelligence, and at what point could a robot be considered a person even though they're not a human. And a book that I think does a really interesting job with this is A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is probably the most popular book on this list, most well known. This is book 2 of the Wayfarer series, but they are can be treated as like standalones. It is a sci-fi, it's a fairly epic sci-fi set out in space on a different planet, spaceships, all that jazz, and it follows the story of an artificial intelligence program that gets put into a physical body, a robotic body, and it is about her quest to not necessarily become recognized as a person, but basically it is about her interactions with the world and how she's finding her space in it. And then there's a whole other kind of sub story with another character about her, and there's like genetic modification in the background, and she has this really intense relationship with as in a parental relationship with a different artificial intelligence program. And it's about, you know, how these are programs that in theory are rote and standard, and there's like 20,000 of them in every ship, but at what point do your experiences mean, because they are interacting and learning from these experiences, do they become individuals in their own right with their own personal identity, independent to their like factory settings, basically. Really, really fascinating and interesting. Like I said, I don't think you need to read book 1 to be able to read this. I think it can be treated as a total standalone, and it's my favourite of the 3 so far that are in the series because of the fact it's dealing with such interesting and cool questions. All of this discussion about these books, if any of this is sounding interesting, I'm sorry it's been such a like weird garbled mess. It's so hard to explain this in a way that doesn't just become a mini lecture series about philosophy, which I'm trying to hark back to like 6 years ago when I graduated. But basically, if you find any of these topics interesting and you want to find out more about the philosophical discussions behind philosophy of the mind and personal identity, continuation of the self, etc, etc, a good place to start is The Pig That Wanted to Be Eaten and 99 Other Thought Experiments by Julian Baggini. I've talked about this book on my channel before, everybody knows I love it, but basically what I did was I went through and I like bookmarked a bunch of the thought experiments that are about this particular kind of topic, and I came up with like a solid 20 in here that discuss variations of it, whether it be memory or swapping brains or transitive properties or a whole bunch of stuff. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to link down below as many names as I can of people who are writing or were writing this field, because some of them will be dead. Philosophy goes way, way, way back. We still talk about people from ancient past. I will link down below some of the things I found on like some of my old essay reading lists and references like that, things that are referenced in this book. So if you do want to go on and read some of the kind of original articles on these topics, then that's a place where you can start. If you know of any other books that deal with these kind of topics, whether they be fiction or non-fiction, please do comment them down below. I'm always keen to read books around this kind of topic. I find the way that we identify ourselves and understand the conception of ourself in a space fascinating, and the connection that has with memory and the connection that has with our physical bodies, and just the way that our intuitions around being able to draw harsh lines between my identity and your identity are something that I find really cool and really interesting to look into. If anybody has some really accessible good AI books, I'd love to read about them. That's a topic that I really want to get a bit more of a knowledge base in, knowing full well that anything you read will be out of date 3 seconds after it's printed, because tech moves so quick. And if you enjoyed this video, please do let me know. This might be the most niche video I've ever filmed on this channel, but it was really cool to do and I've been meaning to get it done for ages. So that's pretty much it from me. Have a wonderful reading week and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.